private cloud, it's not really the same stack. You can't really say, oh, it just runs here, it will just automatically run elsewhere. There's a bunch of services that you've composed to build your application, and just assuming it's going to work elsewhere is kind of, every customer's dream is this magic portability, but you can mitigate that. So from your question's perspective, what's the relationship between us and other cloud providers? With both Force.com and our 4GL platform and Heroku, which actually runs on Amazon's EC2, we want developers to be able to use application services, whether they are from Microsoft, whether they are from Amazon, whether they are from HP, and build applications fastest. So they're clearly a leader in the infrastructure as service market. So if you want to buy more compute capacity or storage and all those services, they are the leader there. And so we are seeing a lot of customers who would use basically, would write an application in Heroku and store big blobs of files in S3, right? I mean, S3 is probably their single most popular service. So it's not just marketing. I mean, customers who are actually believe in the cloud do want to use these services together. So whether it's Heroku or Salesforce platform combined with Amazon or with Azure, frankly.
So I would certainly say that Amazon is a big channel for us for Windows Server, Windows Client, Windows Server at least. So I think.
But you have your own data centers for Azure as well.
Yeah, we have about 6 data centers globally, and hopefully we'll be building more. But they're located in different regions: 2 in North America, 2 in Europe, and 2 in Asia Pacific. But you were talking about the relationship between us and Amazon. I don't think there's anything official that I know, but certainly they're a great channel for us from a server perspective.
All right, I have a lot more questions, but I think I want to open up the audience. Yeah, if you want to direct the question, certainly do that.
Okay, you want to know who we are or what?
And if you want the question to anybody versus one, I don't want 4 answers to every question.
Right, okay. Well, first of all, this is the battle of APIs. Salesforce has its own, VMware has its own, and so does Amazon and everybody. And Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla, and other people like Eucalyptus and all that are trying to make it equivalent so they can all work on AWS. So there's one established standard, and don't be surprised that more and more people will be migrating towards it, make it compatible. So the question is, given that APIs, think of APIs for people who are not familiar with it. Your API just speaks French, his API speaks English, his speaks Spanish. And unless you talk to each other or you have translators, you're not going to talk to each other. So APIs of one company versus API of another company are very different, and once you get locked in, you are locked in. So given that, so the question is, does Salesforce.com does think in terms of what's evolving from the, let's say, the OpenStack? Are you going to be a member of the OpenStack and join the club? HP and Rackspace and a whole bunch of people have done. Number one, that's one question. Second is, once the big data comes, and HP is doing object store, that means they're putting metadata along with data. That's a huge change that's going to happen through a la Hadoop and whatnot. So the question is, people like Salesforce, how are you going to migrate towards the big data? I mean, you're great in doing CRM, right? And that's where you started the company, then until the buzz came and other things. So the question is, what is your future? Right now, you're running high and all that, but there's a lot of things, waves coming from behind.
Thanks for the colored commentary. I think there's a couple of questions in there and a couple of comments. So I won't address the colored commentary. That's up to others to decide. Maybe panelists, my fellow panelists, can join the gang. To your core question, which is basically a fairly straightforward question, frankly, there's 2 parts to it, right? There's infrastructure as a service, and as was the one slide that I was very clear about was, we have no intention, right, as currently stated publicly, to be an infrastructure as a service. We want to be the cloud application platform player, right? What that means to us is building business applications, right? There are 1 million business applications built by customers. I talked about that. There are 1,000 plus ISVs that build business applications on our App Exchange. Everybody except SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, I can go through the list. Concur, the largest expense management company. Infor, one of the largest software companies in the world. Workday. We have all these big, large ISVs building on top of our platform because we have a leading platform as a service, which I was talking about. So the one part of the question is, it's a proven, trusted platform as a service. Yes, there's another company that's a leader in the infrastructure as a service market. We think these are two distinct markets.
Different set of APIs. It's essentially at a different level. So if you want to,
the
shared resources are the servers and infrastructure. Then you go with OpenStack or VMware or CloudStack.
Yeah, it's like trying to compare a memory controller in a PC with your operating system, right? So think of platform as a service as an operating system, and think of storage call and making a call to compute as memory controller calls, right? So it's a high level of abstraction. So that's one. But the more important question is APIs. APIs are REST. You talked about like talking French versus that's a wrong metaphor in that context, because what you want is my API, which is also a REST API, and his API, which is also a REST API, and his API, which is also a REST API. They're all speaking the same English language, frankly, and you can actually make a call from our platform or Azure's platform into Salesforce's platform and vice versa, and store data. You can, I can launch a Hadoop job on HP when they have Hadoop available, if they have that available today. Azure has something like that available today. So all of these things interoperate and talk to them, and we have live customers that are using all of this today, right? Third part of your question was, in the future there'll be other players and they'll all flourish. God bless them. There's hundreds of billions of dollars in market available. I hope all of them come to the cloud and all that computation moves to the cloud. It'd be good for everybody. It's not like one person's win is another person's loss in this market.
The question was, can you migrate the application from one platform to another? Is there a realistic or not realistic?
So depends on the level. So when you write an application in Node, Scala, Ruby, Java on Heroku, you can basically port that application exactly as it is and run it elsewhere, because it's a standard language-based application. If you choose to use our 4GL system, it's a proprietary system. We don't make any bones about it. If you're using clicks, not code. It's a very simple example I give people is, writing your application in Node or Java, whether it's on Azure or on Amazon or on Heroku, is like building your own house, right? It's like building your own thing. So you get to customize the hell out of it, and you can actually take it wherever you want to go. Building an application within Force.com is like using shared services. So it's like renting a room in an apartment complex. You can move, you can take your data with you, but you can't take the swimming pool home with you. I'm sorry, right? But you can move to another complex that has a swimming pool. So there are other platforms as a service that have the same data. So the higher up you go in abstraction, it harder it becomes to do portability. But if you're using a 3GL environment, you can run a Ruby application on your local system and run the exact same application in Heroku. There's
I have a colorful comment and black and white question. So my colorful comment is that if a customer wants to migrate 25,000 DOS application, I would say, I have no sympathy for you. Go out, smell some roses, and then when you come back, fire your CIO. It is unacceptable today to migrate that many applications, retire. My question, the database is very precious. That's the new oil, okay? And that database, when I have terabytes of database or a petabyte of database, how do I operate in the cloud? If you dedicate the machine forever, because you cannot move that amount of data, swap in and swap out, If you dedicate the machine forever, then I'm not getting any benefit of sharing and all of those things you are talking about. So how do I deal with the terabytes or a petabyte of data?
Why don't we I don't.
Okay, I'll tell you. I think the question really is, you may have a lot of applications to migrate around. You may rewrite some of them and be able to move them back and forth. But ultimately, you have data, and the data, as I mentioned, is not so portable. How do you move? It doesn't port from one environment. It doesn't move so readily from one environment to the next, if you decide that you need to move your data. That's the legacy challenge. And I think what you'll see is companies like Hewlett-Packard, Amazon has a service today which facilitates bulk transfer of data, frankly, and that's not really going to be, the real issue isn't moving the bits around the terabytes, it's moving the knowledge that's in that data, the schemas that have been developed over these years and the interrelationships between all that stuff. And frankly, these applications that exist, they're not going to be ported. These legacy applications aren't going to readily be ported. They have to be rewritten, and when they're rewritten, the data is going to have to be exported from the current system and imported into the new system. And hopefully the CIO or the service, the consultant, whoever that's going to be, the system integrator or the VAR, however that sale's happening, will be a modern CIO and not get, get
So my question is that I have large amount of data.
Yes.
I'm willing to move it on the cloud.
Yes.
Okay, even if I use any one of your cloud, okay, to move that amount of data, do I get any benefit, any economy of scale?
You'll have to do that equation yourself. But I think of the data as your swimming pool for starters, and so people do build their own private swimming pools instead of using the public pool down the street. But other families decide to join the local swim center, and there's an analogy there. It starts stretching a little bit, I understand. But frankly, look, somebody mentioned that Amazon's one of the largest use cases is the S3 data store. So clearly the people that are using that are figuring there's some value or they wouldn't all be there. So I think every company is going to have to do that equation. The advantage of using a cloud-based storage, you can start ticking them off. You don't have to hire operations people to run it. You've got resiliency across multiple availability zones. You've got guaranteed latencies. You've got bandwidth commitments in the SLAs from the provider that are hard to maintain in a company's private data center. If you're a shoe company, to think about all those things is just a challenge. It's a waste of your resources. You should be thinking about how long those shoelaces are or something more relevant to your business. So I'm not going to defend the decisions, but just think about it logically, and there is an answer that people are gravitating towards.
But Raj's point may be that the S3 data is probably being generated locally. It's probably not migrated from somewhere else. It's probably from new applications that used S3, using EC2 and S3, they probably got generated there.
How long does it take for you to using a bulk API or whatever, or shipping a disk in case of, if it's really petabytes of data? Moving data is not a problem. You guys use Netflix, everybody here uses Netflix. Netflix is how many hundreds of gigabytes, right? You do that in a matter of an hour or two, and you guys are using your home network, right? It's not even like a T3 line. So moving data is not a problem. That's what you were basically alluding to. So I don't see a fundamental. What you seem to be asking is, what's the value you get out of moving your data into the cloud? Is that your fundamental question? The value you get is the power to build business applications to be more agile and basically not have OpEx and all these problems that Thomas was talking about. So if you're perfectly happy with the database that you have in your data center and it's delivering value to your business users and to your customers, it's like if you're happy with your house, why would you go stay in a 5-star hotel? You're just happy. But if there are services in that 5-star hotel, whether it be a shared, the fact that it's searchable data, the fact that it's more resilient, the fact that it is compatible with third-party systems, the fact that when we do an upgrade of our system, it automatically, if you move from disk-based storage to SSDs, it automatically happens for you. If those are not valuable to you, then in that scenario, I'm not saying it personally to you, but in that scenario, then there are applications today, you know this, at most banks that are running on mainframe, and they'll probably be running on those mainframes for decades to come. Why are they not rewriting them on a SQL database? Because there is no value to them as far as they can perceive. So they're not going to rewrite them. The question for you is the data that you have in business use cases you have relevant for, does that data need to be accessed by an iPad? Right? If so, how are you going to make that available from your data center? Does that data need to be searchable? Does that data need to have a social feed so I can follow, some order status that you have there? If all those questions, the answer is no, then, you're perfectly fine where you are at.
Just a comment on the use case around this. Thank you. I have a customer, an exchange customer, every morning before opening the exchange. Half an hour before that, they upload the data into the cloud, do the computations, bring it back. So it's, again, depending on the use case that
Hi, I have a couple of questions. One is I would like to get some more information on site.com. Can young companies build solutions like a mix of e-commerce / mobile solutions using site.com? And the other question is a little disruptive, but we did talk about the other sleeping giant or another 800-pound gorilla, which is Oracle. They have a cloud strategy that's I'm hearing in the news. What are your opinions generally about that?
Sure. So, Site.com is I talked about the product. It's basically a product for building and managing your websites in the cloud. It's kind of funny that websites are the last thing to move to the cloud or haven't really moved to the cloud completely for businesses and enterprises. So yes, we're looking for partners, SIs, design partners, design agencies. We just launched the product, as you know, and we're looking for partners to help us drive. So I'll be happy to have a conversation, exchange business cards, and help you grow there. As far as my previous employer's cloud strategy is concerned, we were just talking about that. I think Oracle has a great cloud strategy. I think strategies are awesome. They don't come with a login button yet, but other than that, it's awesome. It's good to have a strategy.
I think I can only say Hewlett-Packard and Oracle have a long-standing business relationship. You can read about it in the press. No, we're not every company is developing cloud strategies. It's the next wave of IT transformation. We all see that. We all know that.
If you don't have APIs, you have strategies.
I think you also have to just think about it from their perspective. They have a franchise. They need to collect money. And if they don't protect it, those customers will go somewhere else. So the only way you can protect it is by selling these things called Exadata and Exalogic and so on, and just give them more compute power and make them think like it's a cloud that's elastic, that can scale with their needs. Sure, you can make money in the short term. Long term, it's really just a strategy to keep them on their software platforms. That's what I think.
That's why it's going to be so interesting to watch how do you transform your existing portfolio of products, make them cloudified, deal with the fact that change from these license kinds of models to a service model, and how the companies handle that will be actually something very fun to watch for the next few years.
A two-part question. Can you address the sophistication, effectiveness, and reliability of security of proprietary information on the cloud, particularly for industries that have a lot of proprietary client data that they're obligated to keep that way? That's one. And then two, for the small or mid-sized business, particularly the small business, in terms of pricing, it appears to me that for the cost of 1 year on the cloud, you could get somewhere between 3 to 5 years out of a quality server in today's marketplace. So why would a small business move to the cloud with that kind of pricing? Well, maybe I'm just uninformed about that, misinformed about that.
Can you give the example of the small business? Is the small business in the business of building software, or is it in the small business?
No, it's a professional firm. So I own a professional firm, a law firm, right? And I've talked to people in accounting firms and other law firms. And in the smaller firms, that's kind of, everybody sort of agrees with that. So if I can go out and buy a server, say, for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, it's probably going to cost me $5,000 or $6,000, $7,000 for 1 year to be on the cloud. And I'm going to pay that every year. Why would I do that?
Who runs the server?
Yeah.
What do you mean, who runs the server?
Who's managing IT infrastructure?
Well, yeah, who runs the server? So I pay $1,400 a year for 24/7, 365 running of the server.
But the other thing I was going to actually add to that is that you have the ability to obviously add on more services that you would, if you had to, in the middle of the year, add on, let's say, if you've got an accounting system, maybe add on Chatter from Salesforce. You have to go out and invest in new infrastructure again, worry about installing it, worry about keeping it running, and whether it's with a host or whoever, I'm not sure who it's with, but it's the ability to be agile, where you can, let's say, go to a cloud marketplace and buy the apps that you need as and when you need. If you're small and medium business, you don't want to focus on the IT infrastructure or the applications or anything beyond that.
I think that from my perspective, it's fairly simple. Most small to medium businesses may not be true for you, right? So let's say you're a 50-person company, there may be one or two people whose official title may or may not be IT, but essentially they spend most of their time making sure that the email server is up and running, make sure your software is up and running, that the software gets patched so that, you know, you're a legal firm. I'm sure you don't want your legal documents to get misplaced. Someone has to make sure that the data gets backed up on a tape, and then when that tape, you need to find that tape from a year ago, that guy may have moved on to another job. So it's all the intangibles and the tangibles that get added together that are being offered as a service, whether it's from HP or whether it's Office 365, right, or it's Salesforce and Chatter, that is, the cost is all in, right? So you basically just have a web browser and you just log in and you basically do what you need to do. However, if you are IT savvy, and it's kind of like, you know, doing the, you know, you don't count the time it takes for you to commute. So for some people, commute is free. I hate commuting because for me, 2 hours a day, if I translate that into dollars, given how much Salesforce pays me, it's quite a lot of money, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to live 2 hours away. But if I start counting how much rent costs me more to live in San Francisco as opposed to San Mateo, I could be saving $2,000 a month, right? But I'm not, there's no bottom line $2,000 that falls in when I move to San Francisco. The savings is in times and intangibles, and maybe I can come to TiE events and do other things and maybe make investments or whatever else I do. So sometimes it's hard for smaller companies because you don't have a CIO who's basically calculating cost of 15 IT people to actually calculate that cost and amortize them. But in reality, you are incurring this because they're just amortized across your user base.
No, there's not a lot to add. You have to be intellectually honest in terms of your total cost of ownership. And it may well be that it's less expensive. Cloud, you know, not every technology is for everybody. Not everybody needs a mainframe. Not everybody needs an iPad, although that's getting harder and harder to imagine.
Can you address the security issues too?
Sure. Well, Hewlett Packard's position is pretty simple. If you're a company that has the hard and fast business requirement to have your data on premise or in a highly secure data center that you know and trust has been certified by whatever certification board, policy, institute, whatever is required, then Hewlett Packard is happy to step in and provide some of these more modern technologies on that premise site or in the managed site, however it might be. And if your other applications, and that really comes down to what is the advantage of some of these common architectures and common APIs. Perhaps some of your applications need to be that way, but other applications could be into a public cloud environment where you get scale and as your company grows, perhaps if it's growing, or as you have these hidden costs and you start discovering what they really are. So it's a question, and I think Hewlett Packard's very sensitive to the fact that there are countries, as well as industries, that security is hugely important, and the company services those companies today.
What we found is, I mean, kind of agree that at the end of the day it's your choice, but what we found is if, you know, at least from our services perspective, if it's good enough for American Express, if it's good enough for Symantec, if it's good enough for Japan Post, which is a publicly regulated entity in Japan, it's good enough for Ministry of Energy and Trade Information, if it's good enough for DuPont, if it's good enough for Symantec, which is a leading security company, it's probably good enough for 80 to 90% of businesses out there. And you know, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market, both from buyers' perspective and sometimes egged on by people with strategies and lack of products in the market that, hey, you can't store this data elsewhere. In reality, you know, we have a list of certifications. We have more people testing our stuff in reality every day than you will ever be able to. Your entire legal firm has probably fewer employees than the number of people we have testing our software for security, right? So that's just the reality, especially for mid-sized businesses. But then we have these extremely large companies who somehow seem to be, doing more than just fine, storing very important customer data with Salesforce.com. So I think at the end of the day, it could be a religious issue. Some people just don't want to do it, and that's fine. And then they can definitely opt for my friend's cloud.
Okay.
Question in the back.
Yeah, I have two questions. First question, and from couple of comments from Anshu, I get a feeling, about telcos or moving the data around, or Netflix, hundreds of gigabytes moving here and there. I get a feeling that a network is like a dump pipe, like a water pipe. You pour water at one end and it will appear at the other end. So most of the cloud application providers like Salesforce, do they think network that way, or do you really see any issues, the networking challenges that needs to be addressed to operate it at a greater scale while big data is coming, or the other challenges? And the second question is, today we have this Linux and Windows as a de facto operating system running in the cloud, and specifically Linux was not designed to be deployed at this scale, right? So do you see any infrastructure level challenges there, or do you see something happening, a third player coming there, or anything happening in that space?
I guess the question is Linux an appropriate substrate for cloud? Is that the essence of it? Versus what are the alternatives?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the alternatives might be. Windows, of course. Customers are on Windows. I don't know. Look, HP's customers are, by a large number of HP customers run Windows. A large number of HP customers run Linux. They're not complaining about scale and reliability. The next layer up on that, in Hewlett-Packard's case, is OpenStack. We have thousands of nodes running Linux, running OpenStack, and plan to have a Hewlett-Packard quality service offering. So I'm not sure Linux is. I've heard a rumor that Google's on Linux. So I'm not sure what the issue is.
Let's address the network piece of it. Is there any value in the tweaking the network? Is the question, right?
Yeah, I get a feeling that there are no networking challenges here. Everything is.
No, there's opportunities and there's some challenges too, right? So, give an example. First and foremost, not every country in the world has connectivity, right? So, a lot of sub-Saharan Africa. India till 2-3 years ago, right? Like every time I go to India, I'm like, oh my God, they're getting closer and closer. I was in India, I was traveling. Well, as long as I was within 150 miles of Delhi, I had 3G. And frankly, 3G in India is way cheaper than 3G here. It's not as performant, but you can tell, like within 18 months, 3G in India will be probably more ubiquitous and frankly, way cheaper. It's kind of funny. You can turn it on and off, unlike here, by sending an SMS. You can say, I want 3G now, and then I could turn it off when I left the country. So I think those are all opportunities. So as Azure and HP Cloud and Amazon and Salesforce platform, we all make more services available in the cloud. It drives the need for companies like Bharti Airtel to offer 3G services in countries like South Africa and India and China and everywhere else, right? So, and that's all opportunity for telcos, frankly, and that's opportunity created for you. Now, specific to cloud applications and what the networking challenges are, it's the same challenges for everything else that's operating over any kind of a network, right? So anything that makes it faster, so lower latency, you guys have a relationship with Akamai. We have a relationship with a leading CDN player that I don't know if I'm allowed marketing wise allowed to name names, but there's only like a couple. So we have a similar relationship with a leading CDN player. So they obviously are driving some of the traffic. So it's latency, make it secure, make it safe, make it faster. It's the same thing. There's nothing really magical, but anything that makes it happen.
Yeah, I would add the same thing, which is what I had said earlier, is you can enforce quality of service, you can enforce service level agreements on the bandwidth, on the pipe. You can say, if you go to India, for example, you'll get charged more for certain bandwidth, and I'm sure in other countries as well. And if it's a higher bandwidth, you pay more, and if it's lower bandwidth, you pay less, and that's what they're using to monetize that dumb pipe, as you would put it.
Okay, last few questions. So because it's almost 8:45, so.
Just to build on the network question,
instead of thinking of it from a technology point of view in terms of partnering with, say, the tier ones and so on, the go-to-market part of it, take companies like service providers like Verizon and AT&T, they have a large sales force, they're selling to Fortune 1000 companies and so on. And they would love to move up the stack from just selling basic, just acting as a dumb pipe. And they, at the same time, they've got like Verizon has got Terramark, and they are looking to like provide more value-added services. Are there any things, have you guys explored thinking like tie-ins with these service providers for providing combined solutions to the enterprises?
Hewlett-Packard has a number of products that address that exact market. In the States, in the United States, it's a little bit different than it is around the rest of the world, frankly. And here, between iPhone and the Google Marketplace and the iTunes Marketplace, everything's over the top of the network. The networks do have challenges in the consumer space to find places to add value. But I talked about earlier in another segment of the market, small medium business, these service providers have tremendous opportunities. And then you get to the other parts of the world where there are either different regulatory environments or iPhone just isn't as prevalent for whatever reason, $400 or $500 being part of the equation. There are opportunities for those service providers. And Hewlett-Packard is running a number, I don't think, you can't go into all the customer details, but quite a few service providers are using Hewlett-Packard, not only for the fabric to switch the phone calls back and forth, which few people know about, jointly oftentimes, or competitive with Ericsson, but also in terms of these application stores for small, medium business and application stores for consumers. So it happens in other parts. We're very myopic here, in Silicon Valley where everything's AT&T and iPhone.
Okay. Quick question on vertical clouds. As we know, all these verticals have a different need. For example, all pharmacies, almost 80% of the workflow in pharmacies is similar. So how do you see this evolution coming up where you have vertical clouds happening? That means very specialization by these cloud providers. Anybody can answer.
I think it's more of an application aspect than a cloud aspect. So if there's a vertical, for example, if you've got the brilliant idea of all the pharmacies, or 80% of the pharmacies work like this and have the same business requirements and use case, you should quickly codify that and run to the nearest guy with a big bag of money and land all the pharmacies. And what infrastructure you run on is a nice competitive shootout between the features at Salesforce. If you want to be a higher level, if you want to have more control over the compute, you might go to a different company, and you might look at worldwide footprint, whatever your constraints are. So it's really an application. I think you're at an application level there. If a pharmacy were to build a pharmacy cloud, Hewlett-Packard would be happy to help them build that. I'm not sure that would be their best use of capital.
One of our leading ISVs is called Viva, VEEVA.com, Viva. And they basically focus on pharma sector. They actually started out, the name of their company used to be verticalsondemand.com. And the guy who started the company used to actually be part of the ecosystem. And then he realized that one vertical is sometimes just enough to build a really, really large company. So so you should take a look at Viva.com. There's risk management companies. This is what I was talking about. There's 1,000+ companies that are just building business application after business application. There's millions of these installs, and I'm sure similar results are going to happen across all these other cloud providers eventually. So pick one and go after it. That's what the game is for.
Yeah, I think what you'll see happening is you'll take the generic software stacks and optimize them for certain verticals, and you will not actually be maybe going down to the infrastructure layer unless it's something that's very latency or compute sensitive, like digital rendering or something like that has to be done, really, but DNA sequencing, or something has to be done in real time, processing social media feeds, for example, where you've got a fire hose coming from Twitter that you need to process. Maybe for those situations where you do need to get down to the infrastructure there, but for typical verticals, insurance, pharmacy, and so on, you'll probably see optimization of the software stack. You'll do certain things to configure certain things certain ways and provide that out of the box.
Thanks. All right, so last question.
Yeah. I'll quickly ask. There's a public cloud and now there's supposed to be a private cloud. How different is a private cloud as compared to a data center? As in, we always had shared services, IBM was always there providing the data center. So how different is it?
I'll take that one. It's a question of terminology for starters, because a data center would hold the private cloud. But the evolution has really been In the old days, it was, I should say old days, previously, it was one application, one server. And as an IT manager, that used to drive me crazy because I went and got an advanced degree in operating systems so you could precisely run more than one app at a time on a server, and then along comes the IT guy and says, no, 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 you have to buy a separate server for every app because, wait a minute. So that was kind of weird. It was very expensive because the servers were each server had their own app, each server was underutilized. Then came virtualization, which let you say, well, yes, we will take 2 virtual servers and put them on one physical server, but we're still selling 1 server per app. Now with cloud, the next generation really is the elasticity aspect of things, where you're not necessarily, where the applications as they're rewritten, they can scale and grow and dynamically use services, so it's virtualization and a lot more. And that's really the key. And in terms of private versus public, private simply means I'm taking that next generation of technology as an IT provider or IT department, and I'm deploying that in my data center. So it's private to me. And public means I'm up sharing, I'm in the public swimming pool, other people are swimming in the other lanes, and I'm swimming in my lanes, and there are various levels of quality of service and how, what the temperature of the water is going to be, if you want to move with these analogies, and how many other people are in my lane, and you deal with that. But it gives you a lot of flexibility because you don't have to pay for the water, basically.
Excellent. Wow, it's almost 9 o'clock. Thank you all for, first of all, a big round of applause for our panelists today. Thank you very much. You can certainly, if you have any specific questions for you guys, we'll be happy to take them. Yes, so.